You're listening to Beyond the Label, a raw, real-life look at living with disabilities. The views and comments expressed in this podcast are not necessarily those of the AMAA or our sponsors. Thanks for listening.
Welcome to Beyond the Label, a raw, real-life look at living with disabilities. Presented by the Adaptive Martial Arts Association, the nation's leading resource and support network for the adaptive martial arts community. Check them out at adaptivemartialarts.org. Breaking barriers, one move at a time.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Label. I'm JD.
I'm Charlie Murphy.
And we are joined today by Kenn Perry. Hey, thanks for being with us, Ken. And
Hi, thanks.
Hey, Charlie, what information do you have about Kenn?
The notes that you gave me says Kenn Perry black belt.
Yeah, I did that because it's like a black belt test, Ken. I'm trying to test this guy. He was in radio with me for a number of years, and I said I'm looking for a co-host for this podcast. You up for it, right? And he always needs notes and all of this stuff. And I said, if you were a real pro, you'd just be able to fly by the seat of your pants like I do. And so that's all I gave him for notes. So this is his announcer black belt test tonight here on Beyond the Label.
It's funny because I have my associate's degree is in radio and TV production. So I did radio way back in the 70s. And so, Frank, I understand exactly how you feel. We would love to have organization, and nothing ever happens that way on the radio.
Nice.
So, Ken, I guess we probably start this episode where we started. So, a couple of years ago, my wife and I, Katie, we went to the Super Show, and we picked up Charlie a shirt there. And then we always, after the Super Show, we always bounce over to Texas. My mother-in-law and my niece are there, and my sister-in-law. And so we're on vacation, and usually when I'm in work mode, I'm in work mode. And so the deal was that vacation was if the phone rings, like, we're not doing that this time, right? And so I said, okay. And I don't know, I got all caught up in the hype of the Super Show, and the phone rings one day, and I said, I got to get this. And so I answered it, and he said, hello, is this the Adaptive Martial Arts Association? And I said, well, yes, it is. I'm Jason Davis, the founder. And I told him the whole story with my radio voice on. And he said, hey, I came across your organization, and I'm looking to get more involved. And I said, great. He said, I'm on vacation. When I get back, let's chat. So we had a few chats, but it's mostly been about business. So to be honest with you, I don't know that much about you, but I'm hoping that you can tell me and Charlie and our audience a whole lot about you, because I've seen some photos and things like that, and you are you're definitely the model for adaptive martial arts. If you see some of the stuff you're doing in that chair, you'd be like, I'm not gonna mess with that guy at all.
So I want to know. So I got a black belt in what exactly?
Okay, actually, I have two. My highest rank is I'm a 4th degree black belt in American Kenpo in the Parker system. If I remember right, Jason has his work in the Tracy system. I started in Tracy and then transferred over to Parker. And my other black belt is in small circle jiu-jitsu. Nice. And I play around with sticks and swords and knives and whatever else.
Okay. And what is your disability? Jason mentioned you're in a chair.
I use a chair now. I am a polio survivor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I got polio back in 1958.
How old are you?
66.
66, okay. So polio in 1958.
Yep.
And you were able to get around for a while, or immediately?
Actually, when I started in martial arts, I was still using a cane most of the time, and I would use the chair for long distances. And then I got very lazy, and I stopped getting out of the chair and would scoot all over the place. Yes, you started out on crutches, started out way back when on those wooden underarm crutches, then moved to Canadian woods. Then about age 13 or 14, when I realized girls didn't like guys on crutches, I started using canes, and which is one of the reasons why I ended up learning so much about sticks without getting formal instruction, and then got formal instruction later on.
So the interesting thing that you mentioned, Ken, is basically that that transition, moving from crutches to the wheelchair, um, because you got lazy, and I've heard it put that way several times, and I can see where that might happen, and that's one of my biggest concerns with living with a disability. I mean, I'm 43 now, and I just, on my birthday, I got a nice little nerve test, and so I found out that I have carpal tunnel in both hands, and having to think about doing things a little differently, and so now I just tell people I'm trying to figure out how to get old and still do the stuff I want to do.
Exactly.
But so that concern that I have is true, because it's like, they have me using a mobility scooter for my job, and it's like, man, this is a lot easier. I could get used to this, and I think that's probably what happens. Am I correct in that?
You are right. I tend to travel a lot, and then what ends up happening is you're popping around, and case in point, the thing that really started me using a chair a lot, there were two things. One, I had started in martial arts, and I was worrying more about my balance and less about what I was learning. And two, I took a trip to West Africa, and walking on canes, I wasn't keeping up with everybody else. So I just sat down in my chair, and all of a sudden I could keep up with everybody else. And I was able to focus on what I needed to focus on, not on my balance. I laughingly make the comment that I got lazy and started using it. But now I tell people I wear chairs, I don't use them. They're like a fashion accessory between between sticking batons underneath the seat just in case, or sliding a tactical defense apparatus somewhere, and then just figuring out how to move around in it. I'm lucky enough that I can still walk some, so there are places that I can go with, like I'll have a fold-up cane underneath my chair, so that I can then get up and use that if it's so if I'm so inclined. So, but I know that for a lot of my friends, that's not their option. They get to pick their chair, and that's where they're going to be.
Yeah, right.
So,
The other thing I wanted to ask you, Ken, was obviously back in the time when you were diagnosed with polio, and back in the time when you got involved in martial arts, it was a different time. And for me, back in the 80s, I mean, it was a different time. I mean, as you know my story, I mean, I was turned away over the phone when I was 8, and so what were some of some of those struggles like, or did people have a pretty open mind?
I'm so glad that you asked that question. What I can tell you to the day, really within a half an hour of when I decided I wanted to learn martial arts. It was the first Friday in September, 1966. And it took me 22 years from that day for me to find somebody that was willing to teach me. Yeah, I mean, it was it was just a big deal. I kept my eye on the prize. I knew I wanted to do it. And then one day at I was actually playing around with some people playing wheelchair rugby, and someone handed me a flyer that rehab hospital was going to start a wheelchair self-defense class. And my first class was with, let's see, 3 people had spinal cord injuries. 2 of them had been shot in the back. 1 of them had fallen down a manhole cover or down a manhole. And 2 others had developmental disabilities, and there was me.
And that's where your story begins, huh?
Yes.
So I know basically zero about polio, other than the fact that when I was in grade school coming up, we got a shot so that you would not get polio.
Right.
You got a shot in your arm. Now I'm 56, so I'm 10 years younger. So we had a vaccine for polio. It's all been pretty much eradicated in the world.
On average, the world has anywhere from as low as 200 to as high as about 12 to 1,300 cases of polio every year worldwide.
Okay.
And they tend to be in one region.
Okay. So when you first were diagnosed, I mean, how does it affect you? Where do you feel it? What exactly? Tell me a little bit
For
about
me, my left leg is, I refer to it as a wet noodle. The way I describe polio is it's a paralysis that turns off the motor skill, but not the sensory skill. So I can feel my leg or my legs. I just can't. My left leg, I can't move at all. My right leg has some stability to it. And I wear a left leg brace so that I can have stability, and that's why I can walk. Between that and being able to feel my feet. And you mentioned the vaccine. The polio vaccine, or the Jonas Salk vaccine, was actually approved for distribution April 15th, 1955. I was born in July of 55. You get the vaccine, you get your shot at age 3. My family was away on vacation. I was scheduled to go to the pediatrician the next week. I got polio 1 week before I was supposed to get the vaccine.
Wow.
And how do you, and I wouldn't know because I'm younger than you guys, but so how does that begin to manifest itself? Like, how do you know something's wrong? Is it like a light switch? Like one day you're fine and the next day?
Kind of, between the fever and you got to remember I was 3, but I can tell you that my family we drove back home from Detroit back to Philadelphia. And by the time we got back to Philadelphia, I could not walk. I had to go to the hospital straight from there.
Wow.
Huh.
Holy cow.
Yeah,
where do you live?
I spent some time in the iron lung, the whole bit. And it's like, okay.
Where do you reside now?
I'm in Philadelphia.
You're in Philly. Okay. All right.
So
born, raised, and educated.
Oh, okay.
So as we spin this back to martial arts a little bit, so you after 22 years of trying to find somebody, you're like, yeah, I finally found somebody. What was that initial meeting like, and for you and for the instructor? I talk about this a lot, but it's interesting. As I said, the time period was different, so I'm interested to hear this.
Okay, first of all, as I said, my first classes were at a rehab hospital, and one physical therapist was teaching the class, and then within like 3 weeks, she got another job and left Philly, which left it to this delightful gentleman named Skip McClurg. And Skip looked at me, he looked at all of us, but he said to me distinctly, okay, I don't know what we're going to do, but we're going to figure this out for something that works for both of us. And the best thing about him, and I will tell this to anybody that's teaching people with disabilities, he made me prove what I couldn't do. He literally would show me a technique and say, this is what able bodies do, and this is why they do it. So we would take step 1, step 2, And we get to step 3 and say, well, that's not going to happen. And he would force me to stretch myself as much as possible to get through it. And once we convinced ourselves that it couldn't be done, then he said, okay, you don't have to do that move, but you have to replace it with something else that accomplishes that principle.
So this guy was a pioneer. This is like,
Yeah, it sounds like you kind of helped him develop his teaching style as well.
Well, when I started with him, he was a 2nd degree, and he got promoted to 3rd right early, in my development. And one of the coolest things about him was he just wouldn't give up on me. And he also told all of us that had disabilities, said his goal was to teach us in such a way that we could leave him and we could roll onto the floor of any school, and we would know enough about ourselves, our conditions, and our abilities to be able to flow and meld into any martial arts class. And I have found that to be true for me. I've been lucky. Rumor has it that I'm the first person in Kenpo to go from white belt to 4th degree black belt totally in a wheelchair.
Oh, wow.
Like we codified every single technique and said, this is this, and this is why this is different, and this is the Kenpo principle that goes along with it. And we moved on from there.
Wow. Very cool.
that's awesome. Now, from a student perspective, how was that for you? Was it frustrating at times, or were you just as eager to have the opportunity? Or
you gotta remember, after 22 years of looking, I was not walking away from it. But the thing that you have to remember about this is he was very good at telling us, you can do this. Don't, I don't want to hear you can't. Just give me what you got, and we will work through it. And the other thing is, I had a lot of support from not just from him, but from the able-bodied students, from another organization. By the way, after all those years of looking for somebody to teach me, imagine my surprise when I found out that the highest ranking person in all of martial arts in the world lived less than 100 miles away from me.
That's crazy, man.
And he, so all of a sudden I'm talking to a guy who's a 10th degree black belt who got his legs blown off in Korea. It's kind of hard to say that you can't do something when you see that level of competence sitting on the floor.
It's yeah, you're definitely amazing to me. I mean, I see videos and I see photographs, and I'm like, man, this guy is the real deal. You make the adaptions look effortless. You have a sense of power, that I think for a lot of people with disabilities, I mean, that's really what we're looking for, is a sense of power and accomplishment, and you just exude it. I mean, even in this interview, I can see it.
Well, I think you've seen that there's a video out on YouTube where it's about a 1-hour demonstration that I did with one of my friends. And one of the things that I point out, and forget whatever, whether it's martial arts or ballroom dancing or tennis or whatever your endeavor is, one of the things that the world will tell a lot of folks with disabilities is that they don't have a right to the space they occupy. That bothers me to no end. And combine that with the fact that I keep telling people there's nothing malicious meant by able bodies when they give us, like, oh, we're encouraged by you and you're an inspiration and all that. The thing is, we as folks with disabilities must not, we can't listen to them. We have to define exactly what our world is going to be and what our rights are, all the way down to our rights to take this space and occupy this space. The great thing about martial arts is I'm sitting in this space and I have the ability to defend it, as opposed to me just telling you, ballroom dancers will just dance around you. If you touch me as a martial artist, I'm going to make sure that you're looking up at the ceiling and saying, I think I made a mistake.
And I'll tell you, Charlie, I don't. You haven't seen the video yet, but when he says that, he means it. Yeah,
He's from Philly. I didn't not believe him at all.
I got a million funny stories for you.
Oh man! All right. Should we take a quick little break here? You think?
That's what I was thinking. We'll roll into a break, and then we'll get into more details about training, and about adaptions and the mindsets that instructors need, the mindsets that students need, and then what you do if you want to get involved, and then how Kenn got involved in this Adaptive Martial Arts Association.
Outstanding.
Right. Well, you're listening to Beyond the Label. It's a raw, real-life look at living with disabilities, presented by the Adaptive Martial Arts Association, the nation's leading resource and support network for the adaptive martial arts community. AdaptiveMartialArts.org, breaking barriers one move at a time. Back in a minute. Stick around.
Beyond the Label, presented by the Adaptive Martial Arts Association, the nation's leading resource and support network for the adaptive martial arts community.
It's no secret, every martial artist, no matter their age, dreams of becoming a legend. Having their name listed among the greats like Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris, and Jackie Chan. You can hide it or deny it, but you know it's true. Being a legend takes raw talent, dedication, big breaks, and an ability to survive a roller coaster called fame. But it also takes one more thing to go with it: the best gear and equipment in the world. From the company that is martial arts, Century Martial Arts. They aren't just another martial arts supplier that's never set foot on a mat. They are martial artists, and that means they know their products and use what they sell. From uniforms and training gear to weapons and equipment, Century has it all for every martial arts style. Although you may never be listed among the greats, you can still shop like one at CenturyMartialArts.com and unleash your legend within. Century Martial Arts, the world leader in martial arts since 1976.
You're listening to Beyond the Label, a raw, real-life look at living with disabilities, presented by the Adaptive Martial Arts Association. Check them out at AdaptiveMartialArts.org.
Yeah. That's how this thing always happens. I'm waiting for him. He's waiting for me. We look at each other.
It's live. It's Behind the Label.
It's
a raw, real-life look at living with disabilities. I'm Charlie Murphy.
I'm JD, I think.
And we're here with Kenn Perry from Philadelphia, home of the Rocky statue.
Yeah, you guys can come and take that 30-mile run anytime you'd like.
So just at the break here, I was saying, so do you have a selfie of you with the Rocky statue? Because that's a big deal for us up here in Vermont, I guess, and everywhere else in the country. But you said that, being in Philadelphia, you could care less if that thing was there or not.
We live it, the statue's there, but it's like, okay. And I did the Philly triathlon one year, and it was a 17-mile bike ride, and I'm like, what made you want to do this, you fool? And then I continued along. I have a lot of activities in there. I was a former tennis player, played wheelchair basketball for a while, and ballroom dancing and the like. Martial arts is the one I've done. Yeah, that's now the longest standing one, and it's probably the one that affects my life more day to day.
Which one would you say has been the most therapeutic?
Martial arts has tons of therapeutic value, because we can talk about the fact that if somebody comes this way, we can tie them up or hit them or whatever. But for a guy in a wheelchair, at least the way I teach it, you want to be able to move your chair. You want to be able to open the door while you're pushing your chair simultaneously. You want to be going through a cafeteria, holding your tray and still moving through crowds, holding onto your bag as you're scooting through the airport. And those coordinations come along with your martial arts training. You know, all of those wonderful star block patterns and coordinating to make sure that you're strong enough to stay upright and working your core. All of those skills get transferred. They, as Ed Parker said, there's a limited number of ways the body can move. The thing that changes is your intent with those movements. Sometimes it's to hit, sometimes it's to collaborate.
Okay, nicely put.
It's yeah, and like you say, I mean, you're obviously involved in a lot of activities, and there are a lot of folks out there with disabilities, and this show brings it to light. I mean, there are a lot of people out there with disabilities that are just kind of like, oh, you know, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? And guys like you and me, I mean, the list is long, and if you tell us about something new, and we'll give it a try. You know, how did you develop that mindset? Because a lot of people say to me, well, it was easy. You know, you were born that way, and so that's all you know, and so you just kind of. But I don't really believe it has anything to do with that. It's like, I want to live my life. That's what I'm trying to do.
As I said earlier, people need to not believe or listen to what able bodies will tell us, because able bodies are going off of what they feel, and they're laying their beliefs on you. Nobody can tell you what you can do but you. You've got to go through the success and the failures. I saw a line the other day that I'm loving these days. You will forget the pain of what you're trying to do. You will never forget the pride you had when you succeeded. And that's one of the things that comes out of martial arts. You're sitting there and you're throwing the punch and you're doing the push-up and you're going through a 3-hour test and you're getting your butt kicked. Do you think you remember any of that when they put that belt around your waist? Not a single bit of it. And you gotta know that you want something. And right now it might just be, I want to be able to throw the inward block. And as soon as they throw the inward block well, and you say, that was great, people want that. They want that praise over and over again. So now they'll say, well, I want the same praise for throwing my outward block. I want the same praise for throwing my reverse punch. And then all of a sudden, they start learning how to give themselves the praise for doing the work, for setting the goal, for doing the work, for impressing themselves. It's wonderful when the able-bodied community says, oh, that was great. But it's really great when you can look at it and say, I gave my best. I know I can do stuff. I know that my limits have not yet been defined. And that's what I walk away from martial arts with.
Nice.
Now, what about as we talk about training, you're an instrumental part in the organization. I mean, and what we're trying to work on right now is a certificate program for instructors. We're actually working with the University of Kentucky, but you're very very instrumental in taking a look at that and helping us develop that. What would you say to the instructor that may be a little apprehensive about working with somebody with a disability?
You just hit my hungry spot with that. Because as you heard me describe my first instructor. By the way, my current instructor is the same way. David Pandano he's all that in a bag of chips. But it's this whole idea of, I'm going to look at you the same way I look at anybody else. Your journey is going to be your journey, but I'm not going to let you be a coward and run away from success. As you may remember, I said that one of the great things that my instructor did was made me prove what I couldn't do, and then said, if you can't do that, what can you do and why? It's so easy, and I've seen a lot of instructors do this, and they mean well when they do it. But what the challenge is that they will go, instead of doing what the able-bodied did, I want you to do this. Okay, but why? So the student never gets to grow about why they are making that move, what that principle is. So they're limiting themselves to what the physical movement is. But as we all know, the key to adaptiveness and integration is a mental attitude and an understanding of the principles of how the world works. So we need to make sure that we tell instructors to fully engage the minds and brains of their students.
I like what you said. I think a lot of the instructors, and it's no offense. I mean, this is scary, uncharted waters for most folks, and as I've said on this podcast before, some disabilities scare the life out of me, and I've gotten better with it through having the organization. But I think what you said is, they get to the part about, I can't, and then the instructor goes, okay, and they don't really know how to go off the I can't. They don't have that second part of the message that you did about, okay, you can't do that, but what can you do, or how would you solve this situation then? So the buck stops at the shock of I can't, and I think we got to push past that.
Absolutely. This idea that you don't know, and the other thing is people don't. I'm very principle oriented, and one of the reasons I'm in Kenpo is because it is so well codified as to what the principles are. And by doing that, it gives a person the ability to say, we are doing this motion to accomplish this. And so when a person can't do that, for whatever reason, be it spasticity in the hand, or they can't kick, or they've never been asked or challenged to. When you get past that and say, the principle says this, you want the person to come down, you want to check their height, you want to check their depth. This is how you're going to do that, and follow up and make them use their apparatus as part of their body, so that you throw the kick, you throw the punch, you throw your punch off of the push of the chair. Therefore, just like an able body is shuffle stepping in, now all of a sudden you're making your chair shuffle step in, adjusting these things. And so when you stay concept and principle based, the physical movement will follow along. And that's how people learn more about their abilities.
And that's, as I say, I think when I said we, I'm talking about individuals with disabilities. We have to think about, how we would solve that situation. And this instructor-student thing, it may be a little different than traditional martial arts, but I think it has to be a little bit, and it's a two-way street. It's you're teaching the teacher, and it's a partnership, and if you're not willing to bring some ideas to the table, and they're not willing to be open to take those ideas, well, then it's probably not going to work. But if both parties are mutually open to working with each other. The sky is the limit. And as you said, I was at a conference. We were actually in Pittsburgh, I think, and Mr. Ward was doing a conference, and they were doing hand techniques, and I was kind of going through the motions, and he was like, "Why are you balancing yourself on one cane?" He said, "To do this hand technique." I said, "Well, I can't really do the hand technique because my crutch is in the way." He said, "Lesson number one, stop thinking of your crutches as a separate part of your body." He said, "It's all the same part of your body." He said, "You're just able to reach out further." He said, "Just start using your crutches as an extension of your body." And when I started doing that, like you said, it opened more doors.
All of a sudden, and you become better at manipulating your crutch. Again, like I said, I don't use a wheelchair. I wear a wheelchair. You wear crutches. They're a fashion accessory that you just happen to have the ability to crack somebody's skull with.
Yeah, Charlie.
So, would you say that that the Kenpo is a little, I don't want to say easier, but as far as implementing your techniques and that kind of thing with your disability, with dealing with polio, is the jujitsu a little? I don't want to say easier, but is it more adaptable for you?
Um,
Because I think of ground and pound when I think of jujitsu. I'm thinking of
see, you're
more,
thinking of Brazilian. You're
more,
thinking
more
of
wrestling
Brazilian,
and okay,
which I can do some of the Brazilian stuff. I use my I do what's called small circle jujitsu, which is it comes with a lot of wrist locks and things like that.
okay,
Which, a lot of times I don't want to kill you. I just want you to stop what you're doing.
sure,
And the jujitsu is very good at that. The thing about Kenpo, I happen to be an academic learner. So to have a system that was written out and codified, Ed Parker wrote like 8 or 9 books on this topic, and a whole lot of other people have written topics on top of that. So I was able to do what I did in college: pick up a book, and go, oh, yeah, there it is, and then bring that out. That does not mean that something like, trying to think of a good one, Gojo Ryu. Gojo Ryu doesn't have as much stuff written down, but it's a wonderful art for a guy who's in a wheelchair. Judo and jujitsu are wonderful are a wonderful system if you're visually impaired. Any art system is going to work nicely for you, it appears to me. And this is me projecting my beliefs, just like able bodies do, on different martial art, on different disabilities. A guy who's, or a woman, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be sexist there, but somebody who's low hearing or deaf has another collection of challenges, but none of them have to do with their ability to kick, throw, punch, move, shuffle, and the like.
Okay. And that's the secret is finding the art that fits for you, and kind of not being afraid to test the waters. Now, what about
before you go away from that, I just want to say one thing I tell people is, it doesn't matter what the system is, find a teacher that teaches the way you learn.
That's really the key to the whole thing, and that's like not just martial arts, that's like life.
Correct.
Yeah, I just I wanted to touch on, because adaptive martial arts is tough. I mean, it's really you're doing something that especially with my disability, sometimes takes a minute for the message to get from the brain to the extremity, and so it takes a lot of effort for me to do, and I've seen this time and time again where somebody will learn the techniques, they'll progress in ranks, but they still don't believe in themselves that it's applicable to the street or that they can defend themselves. Because as you know, individuals with disabilities, well, not you, but individuals with disabilities tend to be more vulnerable, and you know
It's
that type
interesting that
of
you
a
say
thing.
that because, I tell people this all the time. People pick on people because not because they think they can go 15 rounds with them. They're saying, okay, I, I can take this guy out in a few minutes. And it's a big deal for people to understand whatever their package is. Mine happens to be either walking on crutches or being in a wheelchair, and what that brings to the table. But one of the things that I tell, especially my adaptive students, is that you're not, you know, two things. They know one. They know what they think. You know what they think, and you know the truth. Therefore, you have two weapons, they have one. And in that moment of surprise, that is your, and you only get one shot at it, but in that moment of surprise, you want to devastate them. The other thing, like you were talking about some of your challenges, as while you're learning. Has anybody ever really spoken to you about realistically working with sacrificing your balance?
Not really, no.
And so why would, I mean, granted, you've got your crutches, and you're going to try to crack the guy's head like a walnut, and I get it, and I appreciate that. But the reality is that you're more likely to fall down. So it would seem to me that you would want to spend a lot of time, one, learning how to fall, and two, working from a ground position, doing all of your techniques from the ground. When I was coming up through the ranks, I can't tell you how many times I was kicked to the chest so that I would be kicked out of my wheelchair, and then 2 or 3 people would come and attack, because that's what I would see on the street.
Right.
Able bodies never want to be on the ground unless they're Brazilian jiu-jitsu guys. But that reality is not your reality. Therefore, you have to train in your reality. It's just a crucial, because if you don't train in truth and reality, you are destined to fail.
Yeah, and that's what as you talk about that, I mean, that's really my favorite place to be is on the ground. That's where I feel like I have the most advantage. I'm like, and once we get to the ground, that is where I feel the most comfortable. But we haven't necessarily taken those techniques and transitioned them to the ground. It's like, okay, you're on the ground, now what? And I know enough to figure out what, but we haven't
This
actually
is why
taken
I
the.
get back to that issue about principles. It's not the technique. The technique is not cast in stone. The principles can be applied even though you're sitting down, those principles still work. And when I get your butt on the floor, we're going to work it like nobody's business.
I'm looking forward to it. It will be fun. I always enjoy training with different people because you learn so much. Um, Pretty soon we'll have to get Charlie training with us here as well. He's the one that got me into this, so I think he should understand what it's all about.
I wrestled a little bit, and that's about it.
Okay, here I will tell you I'll tell you the worst story about the able-bodied thinking they have the advantage. I was in a place and it was back when I was married. And, you know, I don't know why the guy didn't like me. Maybe he just had a problem with bald black men. I don't know. But he kept like tapping me. And, you know, after a while, you start to know, like, this guy's just trying to check how close he can get. And I wonder why. So he checks, he throws the right punch. And I pinned it, did a strike, was about to do something harmful. And my wife yelled at me and I stopped in mid-technique. And she looked at the guy and said, "You really shouldn't make my husband angry." And you could tell the guy was like, I think I've made a mistake here. And I let go of his arm and I got in my chair and we left the place. But it was, and I got back home and I apologized to my instructor because I'm like, I wasn't looking for a fight, but I had ended up using this. And my comment to it was that we had trained the reaction. We hadn't trained the technique. I didn't care about the technique. My reaction and the principles were there. Mm-hmm. And that's how I responded. And that's what you need to get to be second nature.
That's awesome. You are a wealth of information, my friend. And we're so fortunate to have you a part of the organization.
Just real quick, going back to the early years, Kenn Perry, the early years. What was life like growing up with a disability in the 60s for you?
It was fine. I was very fortunate that I had a couple of parents that said, "Get your butt out of here and go figure out how to live." And I had friends in my neighborhood, they said, "Okay, we're going to go get in trouble." Okay. And so that's how I grew up. I was fortunate enough that my disability, quote unquote disability, became a very big advantage for me. It got college paid for. It kept me out of the Vietnam conflict. It forced me to develop my strengths and for me to inventory what are the things I'm good at. I was articulate. I could read well. I was well educated, and I was in a good education system. And I had the resources to follow on that. So I was very fortunate. I know some people who were not.
Okay. All right.
It's
we kind of asked that because, Jason's got his story and, just kind of like to know how everybody kind of grows up. I mean, if you have that solid supporting cast, I think that makes all the difference in the world.
Well, and that's what I was going to say, Charlie. We've done enough of these episodes now to where the theme of all these episodes, when it comes down to talking about life, the theme is that really your disability, in order to be successful and be comfortable and live a fulfilling life, your disability almost has to be second nature. And I think, like, working with you at the radio station, it was very second nature. We talked about times where, you'd help me down the stairs, forget to give me the crutches back. And it's like, hey, where are my crutches? But that's when I knew that you were comfortable with it, and it becomes second nature. And as Kenn sits here and talks, the conversation he was having with his buddies on a Friday night were very similar to the ones that I was having with my buddies. Hey, it's Friday night, let's go get in some trouble. They didn't say, "Oh boy, I don't know how I'm gonna get you in my truck." They just, shoved me up in the truck, and away we went.
I got to tell you this one to give you an idea of this happened much later in life, but I've had the good fortune of being a quote unquote bachelor for a major magazine about 15 years ago. And so they brought us all to Puerto Rico for a photo shoot. So we're all going out to go party before the photo shoot. And we get to the salsa club, and we get there, and it's a big flight of steps. And I didn't have my braces on. So I'm like, okay, you guys go, I'll just go back to the hotel. Well, 4 of the guys that were there were NFL players. And they just turned and said, "You're not going anywhere." So 2 guys get in the front, 2 guys get in the back, they carry me down the steps. So we're all sitting around drinking, acting stupid. And we're in Puerto Rico. These women are sitting there. I'm like, good Lord, where do these women come from? I push out and I grabbed this woman and said, come on, let's go dance. And she looks at me and said, Papi, you salsa. See, so we start to salsa. Da, 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 da. He looked at me about halfway through and said, why aren't your friends dancing? I said, I don't know. So she goes back to her table and tells her friends, go and snatch them and bring them out on the floor. So I end up starting the party because of that.
I want to know, after all the night of drinking, were they able to get you back up the stairs?
Yes, they were. The bigger problem was the next morning, how much makeup we needed for the photo shoot.
My answer to your question to him, Charlie, was he doesn't remember either. So Ken, I've got to ask you, because you're a guy like me, and it's, so you go out with your buddies, right? And I've been friends with these guys since kindergarten, but they love to take me out, give me a couple of beers, and see how the beers affect the cerebral palsy, and yes. they can't believe that, like, I walk better,
Yeah, but you don't have as much, your spasticity goes away, everything.
Again, we're not endorsing alcohol on this podcast. We're just talking about real life here, man.
I tell everybody, the best thing about being in a wheelchair is when you get drunk, you don't have as far to fall.
That's right.
Well, hey, it's been a true pleasure.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, gentlemen.
Yeah, we'll have to get you on here again and tell us the latest and greatest of what's going on in the world of Kenn Perry.
Yeah, I'm always up for it. I've got a couple of kids. A kid that's just moved up to Canada. He's from somewhere in the Middle East. He ended up with a spinal cord injury, and he's trying to get his confidence together. 16 years old, and you know what it's like to be that. He's going through this stuff. At some point, I'd love to get back and get him on here with you, so you can hear what his challenges are like right now.
Yeah,
absolutely. And anybody that would like to be a guest, just drop us a line. Contact at Adaptive Martial Arts. We want to hear your story. We want to share, real life with living with a disability. So,
how do folks reach out to you, Ken?
You can reach out to me at KenPerus at yahoo.com, and I will respond.
All right. Well, again, it was definitely a pleasure. Thanks for giving us the information. Thanks for, helping me out with my understanding a little more so of polio and what life's like dealing with that, and how you adapt and overcome.
Outstanding. Thank you, gentlemen.
Absolutely. Hey, and when you're in our neck of the woods, hit me up. We'll try to get you.
I want your butt on the slopes.
Absolutely. We'll see you there, man. Thank you very much.
You've been listening to Beyond the Label. It's a raw, real-life look at living with disabilities, and presented by the Adaptive Martial Arts Association, the nation's leading resource and support network for the adaptive martial arts community. AdaptiveMartialArts.org, breaking barriers one move at a time. Our special guest, Kenn Perry, a black belt, all-around neat guy. Appreciate it. Thanks for being with us. JD, we'll see you again soon.
Absolutely, man. Hey, I think you received your black belt. You passed the black belt test in broadcasting.
Oh.
With no information,
well,
we pulled it off.
All right,
man.
Thank you.
All right, talk to you later, buddy. See ya.
Thanks for listening to Beyond the Label. If you'd like to be a guest on an upcoming episode, email contact at adaptivemartialarts.org. Beyond the Label is produced by JD Production and presented by the Adaptive Martial Arts Association, the nation's leading resource and support network for the adaptive martial arts community. Check them out at adaptivemartialarts.org. Breaking barriers, one move at a time.